Good morning, everybody. As Joanna said, the session is about the impact of the Disability Access Officer. Like the Disability Access Officer has existed in a couple of countries already for a much longer time, but on a European level, I would say putting it into the UEFA club licensing regulations in 2015 has made a big step. And now in this panel session, we want to have a look on the changes which have happened throughout the last years. And for this, I would like to invite on stage, first of all, Alexis Angelopoulos from UEFA, if you want to come already. Iva Cigrovski from Dynamo Zagreb. And Pilar Castillo-Cid from Real Betis. And Elena Popova. Please feel free to have a seat. Alexis will start with a presentation where he will give like a overview of first of all what club licensing, UEFA club licensing means, and he will give us an understanding of the developments which have been happening in the last years since it was put into the UEFA club, the DAO criterion was put into UEFA club licensing criterion. He will give us an idea of the good things which have been happening in the last years, and as well some ideas about the future plans of UEFA with the help of CAFE. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, CAFE, for having me here present on what we do with club licensing and the DAO criterion. So as Johan said, I will first start explaining what is club licensing and what we do, just to put things into context before moving on to the DAO role specifically. So I'm part of what is called the Financial Sustainability and Research Division. We report directly to the UEFA President and General Secretary. On the one side, we work very closely with the Club Licensing Committee, who supervise all our work and provide our regulatory framework. And on the other, club financial control body on any financial fair play related matters. So we're part of, within the division, we have 4 different units. I'm in the club licensing, which manages what we call the core process, so any club licensing related documents, submission deadlines throughout the season. We develop the system, promote it at domestic level, and provide guidance to licensors, national associations when needed. Then we have financial fair play, compliance unit, and recently addition, the intelligence center in charge of benchmarking analyses, research, and providing strategic reports to top decision makers in European football. And here's a timeline, just so that you can see the whole development of the system. So it actually started back in 1999, and it actually came from the clubs themselves, who were a bit frustrated with the landscape of football in Europe, bad governance, mismanagement, bad infrastructure. So they came to UEFA asking for a sort of system to be in place at a European-wide level to put in minimum standards for everyone. And that led to a pilot project with 8 national associations in 2001 before first manual was published and first licenses granted in 2004. If we fast forward a little, 2015 edition of the regulation introduced Article 35 bis, Disability Access Officer, which we're here to talk about today. And essentially, the UEFA license is a certificate where clubs have to fulfill all the criteria we put in place, including DAO and other ones. Mandatory and part of the admission process to enter UEFA club competitions. So that includes Champions League, Europa League, Super Cup, and we've just added the UEFA Women's Champions League as well. And these criteria are divided into 42, coming from 5 different sectors, which I'll go a bit later into. And we also provide flexibility with the system so that each country can adapt to their own needs. So it's actually the licensor or the national association who will take the decisions whether to grant, refuse a license, ask higher standards or not, depending on their needs. And I just want to make a brief contrast between club licensing and financial fair play, because people often confuse the two. So club licensing is any club that wishes to compete in our competitions have to get it, whereas FFP is for clubs that are in the competition and are subject to additional financial rules. And the criteria I was mentioning is based on 5 pillars: sporting, personal, administrative, infrastructure, legal, and financial. The DAO finds itself in personal and administrative, along with other roles such as supporter liaison officer, youth development program head, etc. And most of our development initiatives found themselves in sporting, where we put a huge emphasis on youth and educational programs. And lastly, just to give you an idea, last year, out of 719 clubs in top divisions in Europe, 575 applications in total, for 495 clubs being granted a license and 80 refusals. So that essentially means that those 495 clubs have had to have a DAO at their club. And actually, from the information I have, only 2 out of the 80 refusals were sanctioned for not having an adequate DAO out of the 575. So now, the DAO role in more specifics. So I imagine most of you know the DAO criteria means that clubs must have appointed DAO in charge of to support the provision of inclusive, accessible facilities and services, and regularly meet with their relevant club personnel. And when we implemented this provision, we also mandated CAFE to help us implement this at a European-wide level, provide training, guidance, bilateral meetings whenever necessary. And they help us in various ways, especially in the last year, through surveys, training programs, guidance and best practice documents, the DAO criterion itself, and ensuring that there's adequate staff in place, and exchange. In terms of surveys, we have 2 recent ones, one on stadium access, which was completed by 61 clubs in total, and 81 clubs completed the audio descriptive commentary survey. And this will help us first by CAFE to provide a good idea of what the current landscape is, and by extension UEFA, so that we can see where to improve, where there is a need to concentrate on. For instance, with ADC, I think through the survey we found that there's only 4 or 5 countries that have fully implemented it at national level. So there's still some work to be done in that area. In terms of training, the last year, CAFE held several diet trainings, so disability inclusion and etiquette training, where 16 national associations were represented for 504 participants. And similarly, 20 national associations represented for DAO trainings. And that's actually quite impressive when you think that originally we only had 5 planned for this season. So this shows that the interest is growing, and people are starting to understand the need, the importance of the role. And I also want to make maybe a little parallel with SLO role, the supporter liaison officer, which was introduced in 2012. Because with the DAO, these are relatively new roles, and I think it takes a bit of time for people to understand what exactly is the need and the importance and the benefits of those roles. But once this starts happening, it'll start gaining traction, and we will see a lot of better results, as this has shown. Several guidance documents were also produced on job description for national DAO coordinators, ticketing and seating management procedures. So not just to provide adequate seating, but making sure that everyone has an opportunity to find proper ticket sales, and making sure equal treatment is in place, so that a disabled fan will not have to do his application maybe 2 weeks or a month in advance, but can do it at the same time as anyone else, even on match day if necessary. Various European DAO experiences shared mainly on CAFE's Facebook DAO group, but also 3 of them being published on the DAO portal, which brings me to number 4, the DAO portal, which was recently introduced last month and centralizes all information related to the role, as well as wayfinding and signage and sensory room guidance. Another highlight was the Dao Handbook we published last September 2017, which with hard copies distributed to all 55 member associations and their clubs. And you can find translated versions in French, Russian, German, English as well on UEFA.com. I know also the Hungarian Football Federation, Croatian Football Federations have translated themselves, and you can find them on the DAO portal as well. And the main aim of this is to assist the national associations, league clubs, ensure effective implementation of the criteria, and be used as a toolkit for existing DAOs as well. And now we can see a bit of some of the progress since the introduction of the role in 2015, which I think shows we're on the right track. As 17 national associations have appointed a national DAO coordinator, 31 have included the provision in their domestic regulations, so for their own competitions, and we have a total of over 500 DAOs now in Europe. And in exchange, we've had 7 in total DAO bilateral or exchange meetings in the last year, with another 10 or so planned over the next season. And the DAO network group is being recently established, with the first meeting to take place in January 2019. And again, I want to make maybe a little comparison with SLO here. I think initially, it took some time, as I said before, to get some traction in terms of the SLO network. I think they were only 8 to begin with, and now they've reached 21 in their network group. And already in terms of DAO, you're already over 20 for the first meeting, so I think that's already quite impressive. And I was also speaking to Stuart Dykes from SD Europe some time ago, and who's in charge of implementing the SLO role in Europe for us. And he told me that initially you had some national associations who were very quick to understand the benefits of the role. And on the other side, a lot of them, not so much. But over time, they started to see results 2-3 years after the role was implemented. We had some countries like Sweden and other ones who were very good, very on the forefront of matters, so to speak. I think also the recent convention from the European Council on an integrated approach to safety, security, and services to football matches and other sports events is a real benefit, and it might help national associations to get a different, perspective on those roles. Other events where the DAO role was featured in the last year, several of our own UEFA workshops, such as the Hat-Trick Development Fund workshop, Stadium and Security Conference, our own club licensing, financial fair play workshops, European Football Development Network, and again, Council of Europe meetings, and meeting with our president. Now looking in the future, we have, like I said, several training and bilateral meetings planned, the DAO network group to take place in January, and I think the aim is to have 1 or 2 per season. We're also preparing a new guidance document on UEFA's side for our new regulations, which came into force last June, which will feature DAO as well. There's a day in the life of disabled fan and DAO video, which we can look forward to. And further recommendations from CAFE's side to the Council of Europe's Integrated Approach Standing Committee for DAO and the key role they can play, before we finally reach UEFA Euro 2020, and hopefully more work can be done there too. If you want more resources, there are several ones, but I highly suggest to go on the CAFE DAO portal, which everything is centralized. You'll find everything you need there. Thank you, Johan.
Thank you, Alexis.
Thank you.